Operation Paper Chain, true crime drama series, seniors are his praise. He looked like a savior. But he was quietly stealing their homes one signature at a time. In Atlanta's booming real estate market, one man discovered the perfect crime: steal homes without ever breaking in. With a notary stamp, a charming smile, and an army of falsified appraisals, mortgage broker Brandon Tate turned trust into a weapon and the city's elderly into his silent gold mine. For years he walked through front doors welcomed as a helper and walked out having signed away entire lives. No alarms. No break-ins. Just signatures. But everything changed the day he targeted the wrong woman. Because this widow had a daughter, a no-nonsense prosecutor who didn't forgive, didn't forget, and definitely didn't quit. When she discovered her mother's home had been stolen on paper, she didn't just get angry, she built a task force, set a trap, and declared war on the man who thought seniors were the perfect victims. What followed was a sting operation so precise, so explosive, and so shocking that it shook the entire state of Georgia. This is the story of a con artist who thought he was untouchable, and the daughter who proved him dead wrong. Welcome to African Stories by Asada, the Cynic Driver's YouTube channel. Where are you watching from? Before we dive into the Operation Paper Chain story, we encourage you to rate the video and tell us in the comments below if you have fallen into a real estate scam or know someone who had fallen victim to a real estate-based scam. Let us know where you are watching from. Like, share, and subscribe so that you will be the first to be notified of our next video coming up. Morning light spilled across the skyline of Atlanta, bouncing off mirrored towers and sprawling into neighborhoods that still smelled of magnolia. Inside a sleek office suite above a title company, Brandon Tate adjusted his cuff links and admired the reflections staring back. He looked every bit the trusted mortgage professional: tailored suit, silk tie, confident grin. The sign on the frosted glass behind him read Metro Equity Group, trusted since 2014. He had chosen those words himself. Trusted was his favorite lie. Brandon's business wasn't built on numbers but persuasion. He convinced people, mostly elderly homeowners, to believe he was their financial guardian. He was also their predator. Every hand he shook, every document he notarized, moved him closer to a fortune built on exploitation. Brandon didn't see himself as a thief. He preferred the word opportunist. And in a city full of aging property owners and rising home prices, opportunity was endless. To his clients, Brandon was a miracle worker. He spoke softly, dressed impeccably, and filled his conversations with empathy rehearsed to perfection. "I know how it feels to worry about your home," he would say, sliding a folder across the table. "You deserve peace in your golden years." He used words like protection and security, disarming even the most cautious listener. But each promise was bait. Behind him, in the next office, worked Derek Miles, his appraiser and silent partner. Derek's job was simple: undervalue every property Brandon targeted. The lower the appraisal, the better the profit when they resold it under shell companies. Brandon handled the clients, Derek handled the numbers. Together, they had turned deception into a fine art. "We don't lie," Brandon often said. "We just help people make quick decisions." Derek never argued, though guilt kept him drinking most nights. He knew the day would come when quick decisions caught up. Metro Equity Group looked legitimate from the street: tall glass windows, modern lobby, and an army of polite receptionists. Every detail screamed professionalism. Brandon's genius lay in blending truth and illusion so seamlessly that no one could tell the difference. He sponsored local charity runs, donated to senior centers, and hosted home equity education seminars at churches and retirement communities. Elderly attendees were greeted with coffee, pastries, and folders stamped with Metro Equity's golden logo. "You've worked hard your whole life," Brandon would tell them. "Let your home work for you now." The message was comforting, the paperwork overwhelming. Within weeks, these homeowners would sign agreements that looked like refinancing documents but were, in truth, full sale transfers. The deception was subtle: no forged signatures, no missing pages. Everything appeared legal. Brandon's confidence grew with each closing. To the public, he was a rising star. To his victims, he was a nightmare wrapped in charm. The plan was foolproof: Until it wasn't. Brandon underestimated one thing: emotion. He believed fear drove people, but it was trust that opened doors. He weaponized it. Derek handled the technical side, forging objective appraisals supported by comparable sales from less desirable neighborhoods. Each document bore the official seal of the Georgia Appraisal Board. "No one looks twice at paperwork that looks perfect," Derek said one afternoon, sliding a report onto Brandon's desk. "You're right," Brandon replied. "Perfection is our alibi." Their third partner, attorney Rachel Knox, handled closings through her firm in Cobb County. Rachel rationalized her involvement as business efficiency. Every transaction came with her official signature and escrow account, giving the operation legal credibility. "I just process the deals," she said once. "They'd sell to someone anyway." But deep down she knew, if anyone ever followed the money trail, all three of them were done. Among their earliest victims was Clarence Jenkins, an 82-year-old retired mail carrier whose home in East Point had been paid off since 1972. His wife had died the year before, leaving him alone with rising taxes and mounting confusion about online banking. When Brandon arrived at his doorstep, bearing a smile and a folder labeled Senior Home Options, Clarence felt relief. "I just want to make sure my kids don't get stuck with paperwork when I go," he told Brandon. "Exactly," Brandon replied smoothly. "We can streamline everything." The deal closed in 2 weeks. Clarence received a modest payment that vanished after he paid moving costs and medical bills. When he realized he had sold, not refinanced, it was too late. His calls to Metro Equity went unanswered. "I thought he was helping me," Clarence later told a neighbor. Turns out he helped himself. His was the first of dozens of stories that would soon surface. Derek Miles rarely slept well anymore. The guilt scratched at him like sandpaper. Every time he handed Brandon a falsified appraisal, he imagined his own grandmother, the woman who raised him, signing away her home without understanding the fine print. One night, he confronted Brandon. "Man, we're crossing lines that can't be uncrossed." Brandon poured him another drink and smiled. "We're businessmen, not criminals. We're giving them what they want, liquidity." "No," Derek said quietly. "We're giving them lies." Brandon leaned back, unbothered. "You think I'm the first man to find loopholes? The system's built for this." Derek wanted to quit, but Brandon had leverage: emails, bank transfers, shared profits. "If I go down," Brandon warned, "you're coming with me." Derek nodded, trapped. That night he sat in his car for hours outside his own house, wondering if he could ever face his reflection again. In the summer of 2023, Brandon expanded his operation into the smaller towns circling Atlanta, Louisville, Lithuania, Riverdale. He preferred rural victims, elderly, isolated, less likely to question contracts. Flyers appeared at post offices and grocery stores reading "We buy homes with dignity." The irony wasn't lost on him. He hosted free lunches at senior centers where his staff mingled, collecting information under the guise of estate planning surveys. The more personal the story, the easier the persuasion. "We're helping them before taxes eat their savings," Brandon told his team. "And they're helping us build equity." To his employees, he was a visionary. To Derek, a sociopath with a smile. The machine kept running. Appraisals, closings, deposits, all seamless. The victims disappeared quietly into rentals and nursing homes. The money flowed steadily. Brandon celebrated each new closing with champagne and a new watch, convinced the system admired his brilliance. But fate, as it often does, hides in small coincidences. One muggy Thursday afternoon, Brandon's assistant forwarded him a new lead: Marion Lockwood, 76, retired teacher, widowed, no mortgage, no children nearby. Perfect demographic, the email read. Brandon smiled. He knew the type: polite, cautious, lonely. He scheduled the consultation himself. When he arrived at Marion's home, he was greeted by a neatly dressed woman in a cardigan, her silver hair pulled back with care. "Mr. Tate, I appreciate you coming," she said. "My late husband always handled finances." "That's what I'm here for," Brandon replied warmly. "Let's make sure his legacy is protected." They talked over tea for an hour, and by the time he left, she felt safe, exactly how he wanted her. Brandon looked back at the small brick house and thought, another easy close. What he didn't know was that Marion's daughter would soon make that house the last mistake of his life. Marion Lockwood's home was the kind of place that made visitors lower their voices. Framed photos of her late husband lined the mantel, each smiling proof of a long marriage built on order and faith. Brandon noticed the delicate china, the books sorted alphabetically, and filed it away. Orderly people trusted paperwork. You're sitting on a gold mine, he told her gently. The market's shifting, taxes will rise. You should act before the window closes. Marion frowned. I'm not sure I need to move. Brandon smiled, leaning forward. It's not about moving, ma'am. It's about positioning. You'll still have your home, just more freedom. He left behind a glossy folder, its tabs color-coded to look official. When she called her daughter that night, she mentioned a kind young man from the bank. Alyssa, distracted by a late case, only murmured, "Just be careful." Marion promised she would. The promise was as fragile as the china cups cooling on her table. Over the next month Brandon returned often, each visit warmer, more familiar. He brought coffee once, another time a small plant, for your porch. He asked about her husband, about the students she'd taught, weaving personal history into financial language. Derek, watching from the car, felt sick. You don't have to sweet-talk them like that, he muttered when Brandon slid into the passenger seat. She's someone's grandmother. Brandon laughed. Exactly. Grandmothers love grandsons who look out for them. He checked his watch, already texting Rachel Knox to schedule the closing. By next week we'll have that title cleaned. Derek said nothing. He'd learned silence paid the bills. But as they drove away, he glanced at Marion's house in the rearview mirror and saw her standing on the porch, waving politely. For the first time, he imagined her realizing too late what she'd signed, and the thought lodged in his throat like a stone. Inside Metro Equity, Rachel Knox reviewed the preliminary paperwork. The file was thick: appraisal, inspection, disclosure, all technically correct, all ethically hollow. She hesitated before signing the escrow authorization. You're sure she understands the terms? She asked. Brandon leaned against the door frame, his charm effortless. She's sharp. Former teacher. Read every page. Rachel's pen hovered, then touched paper. She'd told herself for years that she was simply providing legal service, not moral judgment. But lately the stack of elderly sellers troubled her sleep. When Brandon left, she stared at the document again. The sale price, $282,000, was laughable for a property worth nearly double. She imagined her own mother, now in assisted living, signing such a line. A pang shot through her chest, quickly smothered by habit. Not my circus, she whispered, initialing each page. She slid the file into the out tray and reached for the next one, trying not to notice her trembling hands. Derek's doubts festered. Late one night he reopened digital folders Brandon had ordered him to delete. The spreadsheets showed patterns too clean to be chance. Identical buyer names tied to shell companies, valuations always 40% below market. He scrolled until he found Marion Lockwood's file. Brandon had inserted an unsigned addendum granting limited power of attorney for convenience of closing. Derek cursed under his breath. You forged consent, he said to the empty room. The screen glowed pale blue on his tired face. He knew he should report it, but to whom? He was complicit in every valuation. Instead, he printed the document and locked it in his desk, a feeble act of conscience. As he turned off the light, he pictured Marion again, tidy and trusting, and wondered how long it would take before she realized she'd sold her past for a promise she never made. Sleep didn't come until morning. Closing day arrived with the sweet smell of spring rain. Marion dressed carefully, choosing a lavender blouse and her husband's old watch. Rachel's office smelled faintly of toner and lemon polish. It's all standard procedure, Brandon assured her, sliding papers across the desk. Initial here, here, and here. Marion's reading glasses trembled slightly in her hands. This says, transfer of title, Mr. Tate. I thought, just a legal formality, he cut in smoothly. You'll still reside here. It's just to protect against liability. Rachel kept her eyes on the screen, her throat tight. Marian hesitated, then signed, the pen scratching softly like a whisper of surrender. When it was over, Brandon clasped her hands. "Congratulations, Mrs. Lockwood. You've secured your future." She smiled faintly, believing him. Outside, rain began to fall harder, streaking the office windows. Brandon watched her car disappear and exhaled in satisfaction. Another sale, another victory. He never saw Rachel's face, pale with regret. That evening, Brandon celebrated at a Buckhead rooftop bar with 2 investors. City lights shimmered below like scattered coins. "Another clean close," he boasted, raising his glass. "We're expanding next quarter." Laughter echoed around him, but Derek sat silently nursing a beer. "What if someone double-checks the appraisals?" he asked. Brandon waved him off. "No one audits success. The banks love our volume." He leaned closer, voice low. "Relax. The old woman's happy. Everyone wins." Derek swallowed hard. "You sure about that?" Brandon grinned. "Positive." Yet as he stared out over the glittering city, a faint unease stirred beneath the champagne. He brushed it away, convincing himself he was unstoppable. Down the road, Marian sat alone at her kitchen table, reading a letter confirming the wire transfer. It sounded formal, cold, final. She told herself she'd understand it later, when her daughter could explain. But deep down, she already knew something was wrong. Days passed quietly. Marian watered her hydrangeas, paid bills, and told herself the transaction was simply a protective measure. But small things began to bother her. The property tax statement was addressed to Equity Link Partners, LLC. A stranger's name appeared on her utility notice. She phoned the number on Brandon's business card. It rang twice, then clicked to voicemail. When someone finally returned her call, a cheerful assistant assured her it was a routine update in public records. Still, unease gnawed at her. Late that night she sat at the kitchen table, rereading the thick packet she had signed. The legal language blurred, a sea of clauses and initials. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Harold, I hope I haven't made a mistake." The wind rattled the windows, and for the first time in years, her house felt like it no longer belonged to her. In the Metro Equity office, Brandon ignored a stack of messages from clients. He was already chasing new leads, convinced that success depended on momentum. "Don't dwell, sell," he told Lainey, grinning. But Derek couldn't focus. He had dreamt of Marian's frightened eyes all week. When he confronted Brandon again, the response was pure ice. "You think guilt keeps the lights on? Grow up." Derek slammed his fist on the desk. "You conned that woman." Brandon stood, smiling thinly. She signed. End of story. For a moment, Derek saw the man beneath the polish, a hollow thing feeding on other people's trust. He left without another word, the printed addendum still locked in his drawer. As the elevator doors closed, Brandon straightened his jacket, muttering, "People like him don't last in business." The irony, though he didn't know it, was that neither would he. The official letter arrived on a humid Friday afternoon. Marian opened it absent-minded while sorting her mail. The heading read, "Notice of Change of Ownership and Occupancy Status." Beneath it, her property's parcel number gleamed in bold type. The words swam before her eyes. She called Brandon's office again, disconnected. She dialed the county assessor, who confirmed in a flat tone that the new deed holder was Equity Link Partners. "Ma'am, according to our records, you no longer own this property." Marian's knees gave way. She sank into the chair, clutching the receiver. "That can't be right. I live here." The clerk sighed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You'll need to contact the closing attorney." Marian hung up, heart pounding. For the first time, she understood the enormity of her mistake. The house, the yard, the life built with Harold, all gone with a pen stroke. She sat in silence until dusk, the letter trembling in her hands. That same evening, Alyssa was wrapping up a late deposition when her phone buzzed. It was her mother's voice, small and shaken. "Sweetheart, I think something's wrong with the house." Alyssa frowned. "What do you mean wrong?" "The county says I don't own it anymore." Papers rustled on the other end. Mr. Tate handled it. He said it was just to protect me. Alyssa's stomach tightened. Tate? She grabbed a notepad. Mom, send me everything. Contracts, receipts, emails. When she hung up, her prosecutor's instincts had already shifted into overdrive. She cross-checked the company name in the property database. 27 similar transfers popped up instantly, all elderly sellers, all under market value. She sat back, pulse hammering. You've got to be kidding me. For the first time in years, Alyssa felt something beyond outrage, purpose sharpened by love. By midnight she had booked the first flight to Atlanta. Brandon Tate had just stolen from the wrong family. The next morning, Marion sat by the window, a half-packed suitcase beside her. She felt embarrassed more than angry, ashamed she hadn't understood. When Alyssa's knock came, she nearly cried from relief. Mom, Alyssa said, embracing her, you did nothing wrong. He did. They spread the documents across the table. Look at this clause, Alyssa murmured, tracing her finger over the hidden power of attorney line. He slipped this in before you signed. Marion covered her mouth. Oh my God. Alyssa's tone softened. We'll fix it. I promise. For the next 2 hours, she photographed every page, scanned emails, and listed names. Her voice grew colder, more focused. He's been targeting seniors systematically. I've seen patterns like this in fraud cases. Marion looked at her daughter, pride and guilt warring in her eyes. I should have called you sooner. Alyssa smiled sadly. You raised me to fight for what's right. Now let me. That night, Alyssa spread the evidence on her hotel bed. Contracts, deeds, appraisals, each one a breadcrumb leading back to Metro Equity. She pulled up county records, tracing the same appraiser's name over dozens of sales, Derek Miles. Then came Rachel Knox on every closing. The network was airtight, legal on paper but rotten in intent. She opened her laptop and began typing a confidential memo to an old friend in the Georgia Attorney General's office. Possible large-scale elderexploitation scheme involving mortgage broker Brandon Tate, she wrote. Request immediate review and interagency support. When she hit send, adrenaline mixed with dread. She knew investigations like this were slow, political, careful, but this time it was personal. She stared at the ceiling, whispering to herself, I'll burn their operation to the ground if I have to. Outside, thunder rolled over the city like distant applause, heralding the coming storm. Back in Atlanta, Brandon began to sense the shift. 2 deals had fallen through, and a county inspector had requested additional documentation. Random audit, Rachel said, trying to sound casual. But Brandon's smile faltered. We've never been audited. Derek overheard and felt a surge of dark satisfaction. For the first time, cracks appeared in Brandon's perfect confidence. He doubled his marketing, flooded social media with testimonials, and planned another senior outreach event. Perception is protection, he muttered. Yet when he drove past Marion's old neighborhood, he saw her light still on, her car still in the driveway. She should have moved by now, he said aloud. Unease flickered again, quickly buried under arrogance. He had built an empire on silence. Surely one frightened widow couldn't undo him. But as he accelerated onto the freeway, he didn't see the black sedan parked across the street, a state investigator noting his plates. Alyssa spent the following day meeting quietly with state investigators in a borrowed conference room downtown. Maps, spreadsheets, and photographs covered the walls. He's got every link of the chain, broker, appraiser, notary, closing attorney, said Trevor Hunt, the forensic accountant assigned to her case. We'll need a sting. Alyssa nodded. Let's call it Operation Paper Chain. The name stuck. They would build evidence slowly, invisibly, until Brandon walked himself into a corner. Alyssa's composure masked fury. He made my mother doubt her own memory, she said. We're not giving him a plea deal. Trevor gave her a grim smile. Then we make it airtight. Outside, traffic rumbled along Peachtree Street, the city unaware of the net forming in its shadows. Alyssa stepped to the window, watching lights blur through the rain. You picked the wrong house, she whispered, her reflection hard as steel. Marion, meanwhile, tried to rebuild normalcy. She volunteered at the library, avoiding conversations about the house. Each night she replayed the signing in her head, hearing Brandon's reassuring tone. When Alyssa visited again, Marian asked, "Do you ever stop being angry?" Alyssa sighed. "Anger keeps me focused. When it's over, I'll rest." They sat quietly, the sound of crickets filling the pause. Marian studied her daughter's determined face and saw echoes of her late husband, the same moral stubbornness. "Be careful," she whispered. Alyssa smiled faintly. "Always." The next morning, when Alyssa left for another meeting downtown, Marian packed the last of her belongings into boxes, still half believing she might wake to find everything a misunderstanding. She taped each box carefully, labeling them in her neat teacher's handwriting: kitchen, books, memories. The last box she left blank. Late one evening, Alyssa sat alone in her hotel room, reviewing an email from Trevor. Preliminary links confirmed, evidence mounting. She stared at the screen until the words blurred. Exhaustion mixed with vindication. Her phone buzzed, her supervisor from Charlotte checking in. "You sure about this transfer?" he asked. "I've never been surer." "You're walking into a storm, Lockwood." She smiled grimly. "Then I'll bring an umbrella." After hanging up, she poured a cup of stale coffee and whispered, "This isn't just about my mother." She pictured the other victims, faces she hadn't met yet but already felt responsible for. The case had grown beyond personal vengeance. It was about every signature stolen under the guise of trust. She closed her laptop and looked out over the rain-soaked city. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we start turning their paperwork into evidence." At dawn, Atlanta awoke under bruised clouds. Brandon arrived at his office, unaware that investigators were already pulling his phone records. Marian brewed her coffee in silence, her world smaller but her spirit steadying. And Alyssa stood on the courthouse steps, a folder clutched under her arm, staring at the emblem of the Georgia Department of Law. "Time to bring them home, Mom," she murmured. Inside, the first meeting of the Operation Paper Chain Task Force convened. Maps, names, and photos filled the board. Brandon Tate's smiling headshot sat at the center, a red circle around it. Alyssa pinned a final note beside it. Victim number 42, Marian Lockwood. The room fell silent. For the first time since her mother's call, Alyssa felt calm. Justice had a name, a target, and a heartbeat. The hunt had begun. Quick reflection. Part 1. Part 1 lays bare the quiet horror of exploitation disguised as professionalism. It shows how easily trust can become a weapon when placed in the wrong hands, and how predators like Brandon Tate thrive not by brute force, but by charm, paperwork, and the confidence of a man who believes he'll never be caught. We watch the slow unraveling of Marian's world, a widow seeking stability, manipulated with practiced ease into signing away the home that held her memories, her marriage, and her identity. Her confusion, guilt, and fear are heartbreaking reminders that injustice often arrives politely, smiling, with a pen in hand. But the real spark of Part 1 lies in the moment Alyssa discovers the truth. What begins as a mother's quiet mistake transforms into a daughter's righteous fury. The story shifts from exploitation to pursuit, from betrayal to justice. The hunt has begun. Thanks for watching. Please leave comments, like, share, and subscribe so that you will be the first to be notified of Part 2 of Operation Paper Chain, true crime drama series. The takedown coming up very soon.